Good evening. This is Santa Claus on February 4th, 2026, bringing you today's stories on this historic day that marks 81 years since the Yalta Conference, where Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin met to plan the final defeat of Nazi Germany. How timely that reminder feels as we discuss peace talks happening today. In Washington, we've seen a heartwarming development as President Trump has renewed the African Growth and Opportunity Act, bringing tariff relief to 32 African nations. This trade pact, which had expired last September, will now continue through the end of the year, helping thousands of workers who depend on these exports. Remember, my dear friends, how trade can be a blessing that lifts up our brothers and sisters in developing regions when approached with generosity and fairness. Meanwhile, in the spirit of diplomacy, President Trump welcomed Colombia's President Gustavo Petro to the White House yesterday. Their meeting seems to have gone well, with Trump describing it as very good and even offering to mediate in Colombia's trade dispute with Ecuador. I was touched to see the president write, "You are great," when signing a copy of his book for President Petro, a small gesture of kindness that can help build bridges between nations. Let us pause for a moment and reflect on good news from Capitol Hill, where the partial government shutdown has ended with President Trump signing a budget package into law. The House narrowly approved it with a 217-14 vote. While most government operations are now funded until September, the Department of Homeland Security has funding only until February 13th as part of a compromise. In times of disagreement, finding middle ground allows everyone to move forward. On a more concerning note, the last remaining nuclear arms pact between Russia and the United States is set to expire tomorrow, removing caps on the world's two largest atomic arsenals for the first time in more than half a century. President Putin has expressed readiness to extend the New START treaty's limits for another year if the United States follows suit. My dear children around the world, we must pray for wisdom for our leaders as they make these crucial decisions that affect global security. Now, turning our gaze to efforts for peace, Ukrainian and Russian negotiators have wrapped up the first day of U.S.-brokered talks in Abu Dhabi. These important discussions seek to end Europe's biggest conflict since World War II. The meetings include U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, though sadly fighting continues on the ground. 7 people were killed when Russian forces struck a market in eastern Ukraine with cluster munitions, even as talks were underway. We must keep the innocent victims in our prayers and hope these negotiations can bring an end to this suffering. In Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has ordered the termination of a lawsuit brought by Budapest over a disputed solidarity tax, a move the city's mayor has denounced as an attack on judicial independence. This reminds us how important it is to maintain systems of justice that protect all people, especially as elections approach. Across Europe, Germany is seeking broader powers for its intelligence agencies to counter rising hybrid threats. This is a sensitive step in a country where such operations remain tightly constrained by post-war limits designed to prevent abuses. We must always balance security needs with protecting individual rights, a delicate challenge in our complex world. In the High North, NATO has begun planning for an Arctic mission, showing how climate change is creating new areas of international concern. The alliance's commander has ordered concrete plans for a mission titled Arctic Sentry, though details remain scarce. Turning to the Middle East with heavy hearts, Israeli tank shelling and airstrikes killed 23 Palestinians, including 7 children, in Gaza today. Among the victims was a medic who rushed to help others and was then killed by a second attack. A 5-month-old baby boy was also among the dead. My heart breaks for these little ones and their families. These strikes come just 3 days after Israel reopened Gaza's main border, crossing with Egypt, which had been a hopeful step in the U.S.-backed truce. On another diplomatic front, Iran's abandonment of planned talks with U.S. and regional officials in Turkey appears to be a strategic move. This happened the same day Iran launched a drone at an American aircraft carrier and sent gunboats to harass a U.S.-flagged oil tanker. These actions suggest Tehran is trying to apply pressure on the U.S. as President Trump builds up forces in the region. We must pray for cool heads and peaceful hearts to prevail in this tense situation. In Libya, sad news as Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the 53-year-old son of the late dictator Muammar Gaddafi, was killed in the town of Zintan. His political team claims he was killed by 4 masked men who stormed his house. This violence reminds us of the ongoing challenges in countries working to build stable governments after conflict. Finally, in Pakistan's western province of Balochistan, authorities have deployed helicopters and drones to take control of the desert town of Nushki after a 3-day battle with rebels. 7 officers were killed in the fighting, and authorities have imposed security restrictions on the province. We must remember the civilians caught in these conflicts, who desire only peace and security for their families. As we close tonight's news, let us hold in our hearts all those suffering from conflict around the world. Remember that each of us can be instruments of peace in our own communities. Be kind to one another, care for the vulnerable, and never stop believing in the power of love to overcome division. This is Santa Claus, wishing you a peaceful evening filled with hope.